The man, the
Hey,
myth. The man, the myth, Bradley. How you doing, brothers?
yeah, hey Paul.
I'm good,
The
mate.
This is a first for me to do this sort of setup. It took me well, not me, the missus to connect me.
No
the
way.
Paul, do you know what? Right, I'll just start off by asking just a couple of questions. I was trying to
Yeah.
think back at how we first got connected and when that was. Do you remember?
Yes, we've just been talking about it. It was you was in the royal courts, weren't you? You were getting quite
Thought it was that. Yeah,
and you got a high court injunction for Pete Glastonbury, and British
yeah,
Gas refused to speak to him for months, and then
yeah.
they contacted him 9 times in one day because of that injunction. And unfortunately, obviously you read the injunction, but I can't remember the judge's name. It was the trans judge, wasn't it?
I
Um,
can't remember either. It was so long ago. I
and,
thought I didn't know it was to do with Glastonbury. But it was I thought definitely this is back when I was doing the charity stuff.
yeah, well, what happened was when the judge looked at that High Court injunction, he reading between the lines, Brad. He went, "This is a very interesting case. This is like
Yeah,
David
yeah,
versus
yeah. It
this is
was
David
it,
versus Goliath."
it was absolutely extraordinary. Let me just explain to you
Well,
how it went down.
it was,
Right.
yes, please.
So let's just say rest in peace, Peter. I met Tony a couple of months ago actually.
Oh, brilliant.
And I've not seen him for quite a few years. The Peter was an extraordinary gentleman. He really was a gentleman. A
He
bit
was.
He's a bit like out there, but he was really charitable with his time. The He did get me into a lot of trouble though. I must admit. With inviting people into my life and saying, "Oh, Brad can help you," but bless him.
I'm
No
one of them.
disrespect. Pardon?
I'm one of them. He
Oh,
said,
okay.
"Everyone's getting all this stuff," but it was just really interesting because you weren't going into the royal courts and being a smart ass or being acting clever. You were using case law. It was just there. This was
Yeah,
stuff that everybody could have used, but you were getting access to it. And I'll tell you what, Brad, that injunction, had Pete been able to go to court and tell that judge why it should have stayed in place, turning up with that gyro, it would
yeah.
it'd have
It
changed. It'd have
it
changed.
was an it was an extraordinary case. So if we go back to it, because I remember it so well, right? And I still believe this to be very true. Yeah. Bearing in mind, I'm not a lawyer. Pete was ill at the time,
Yeah,
and he couldn't make it to London.
yeah.
The other side wasn't there, um, and the police were at his door with British Gas bailiffs. Right. So basically, Pete called me the day before, said, "Can you help out?" And I said, "I don't think I can." I said, I can't understand without you being there." And it just so happens I was going there for something else in the afternoon. And so I said, "Look, I'll do it. I'll give it a go." And the High Court judge, so I went there with all the paperwork. Just you got to like this, as far as to best of my knowledge, I've not researched it since, has never happened before in legal history, right? Where a Mackenzie friend can go into court, advocate for somebody else without neither party being there. All right. So that's extraordinary in itself. Now, fact check it. I don't know if it is true, but I couldn't find any case similar to this. And especially when dealing with British Gas. Now, so basically, I put the position forward. The judge heard me and issued an injunction against British Gas to prevent them from entering his property. I then ran out of the court, literally ran out of the court, because the police nor British Gas believed him that he was in court, blah blah blah, it's being dealt with. I didn't even know we were going to succeed, if I'm honest.
Yeah,
I was just completely winging it.
yeah.
But I had good knowledge about my arguable actions, so I wasn't completely winging it. But I was thinking this. I don't even know if I get rights of audience. That's the ironic thing about rights of audience for Mackenzie friends is at the county court level you struggle. At the High Court you don't have a problem whatsoever.
Mm.
They appreciate you being there. So anyway, so I'm running out of court. there's a printers directly opposite the High Court, which I always use all the time. And I quickly scanned it and emailed it across to Peter and Tony. And then Peter gleefully showed them the injunction. Now, what's really quite interesting about that, so obviously all action ceased after that. Everybody went away on the merry way. And sadly, Peter took even more ill. But British Gas, so I went to the second hearing, again by myself, to do case management. This was about a month later or so, or 2 months later, I can't quite remember. And I'm not joking, British Gas put the kitchen sink at it. I've never seen so many folders for such a simple case. And I said to Pete, "You're in for a fight here." And obviously Pete loves a fight. And I just couldn't believe the amount of folders they bought and the amount of paperwork. It was just so unnecessary. And I said to the judge, and the judge agreed with me. And I said, "Judge, in all honesty, do you realistically want to read all this garbage?" I said, "It's just basically word letters." And the judge agreed with me. And he instructed British Gas to reduce it down to almost a position statement and relevant sections.
Yeah.
I think he used the word skeleton argument. I think that's what he said, actually, from memory.
Yeah.
And so they had to go away. They had, like, I'm not joking, it was surreal. So there's little old me there rocking up, right? And they had like 3 barristers, 2 like clerks, and it was unbelievable. There's even 2 reporters in the courtroom. And so I successfully argued for Peter again, but then he didn't continue. So it got struck out. It got struck out in the end.
Yeah, that's what I said to Pete. I asked him why he didn't go, and he told me that it was because he ended up in hospital with a hernia operation. That's why he couldn't make that hearing, he said. Now, all he had to do, Bradley, was turn up with that joint gyro. That's all he had to do, was show that joint gyro. It didn't matter how many bloody files they had. That was the remedy.
Yeah.
When I was stood in the magistrates' court in Wigan, Brad, and Mr. Ali, the gas agent, had said, "Mr. Webster owes money. All his statement was about how much I owed, but we were there for a forced entry warrant. So when I got into the dock, I said, "Is this a forced entry warrant hearing, or is it about the payments?" I said, "Because I've settled it under the bills of exchange." And this magistrate put her glasses on the end of her nose, Bradley, and looked over at me and said, "Bills of exchange?" And before I could say anything, Mr. Lowe, the county clerk, the court clerk, looked up at her and said, "Yes, ma'am, that's a legal remedy we don't deal with in this jurisdiction," meaning I'm sticking with this bloody warrant. He told me I had remedy, Brad. That's the only word I needed to hear in that courtroom, because I knew then that cheque that gas company had sent me, all I have to do under the bills of exchange is endorse it, and his bill is zero, because creditors set off bills, debtors pay.
Are you on about promissory notes, basically?
No. Do you remember the gyros that were attached to your bill?
Yeah. The bits at the bottom.
Yeah, the bank gyro at the bottom. If it has trans cash, it's a credit check. It's already a check with funds attached. Cash is in transit. So HMRC have taken my taxes, and then through government contract have paid for the drilling, the refining, the gas, pumping, server maintenance of the grid, already paid for. So guess what? When I get my bill, because my taxes have already been taken, I don't pay again unless I'm running a shop, because a debtor is using paid for electric and gas to make profit. So debtors pay. Creditors set off.
What was the outcome in the end?
With mine,
Yeah.
Mexican standoff. Not heard from them for 14 years.
What? So you've not been paying for 14 years?
Nope.
Really?
Yeah, ready to go
Wow.
back to court with it to set it off. Ready to go back to court to set off. But it was. People want to know. Well, where'd you get the court order from that says your gas is free? That's not coming. That's not going to come. Why are you paying for anything else? You've been in these courts, Brad. Is it easy or is it hard when you're trying to fight for your life through all this stuff? I had armed police called on me at Wigan County Court for asking the judge where he got his authority over my property. I was surrounded
Right.
by armed police, and I was a serving prison officer at the time. 3 days previous, I'm handcuffed to a bank robber in Warrington General while he's having treatment. There's no police around anywhere. Yet,
Oh,
Mr.
go on.
Webster,
Explain. So talk me through that story, then. Go on.
I went into the court and I'd already been in one court hearing and I refused to sign anything. I said, look, I don't want your services. If she sells her property, her half of the house, if she sells it, I'll deal with and negotiate with whoever buys it. I said, I don't
Oh,
want your.
is this family law?
This was it wasn't family law. We're not married or anything, but it was over a house. She was on. I put her on my mortgage. It was my
Mm.
house, my inheritance. But sillily, because I was in love, I put her on my mortgage. So in the end, I thought, well, I'm sorted there. I'll just leave it and see if she sells up. Well, they've got another hearing, so I went again. I said, look, I don't want your services. Said if she sells the property, her property, I'll negotiate. No, the judge says, we'll sell your house. The court will sell your house and we'll divide it. I went, where do you get authority over me and my property? My deeds, my house. Where do you get authority? I sat back down in the foyer, the double doors after 4 minutes burst open, 6 armed police run past me and my mate, and they're running in and out of every courtroom like Scooby-Doo. And they end up in the middle of the foyer looking at each other, and the court clerk calls them over. And I looked over at my mate and I went, they're for me. And then I was summoned into a courtroom with 2 armed police in front of me, 2 behind me, and 1 either side of me for the sale of a house. And I needed to know, where do you get in authority? That's my house. My house, my deeds. How can you have control over my property? So I got a face-to-face at Land Registry with somebody legally trained. You can't do that anymore. And this woman at Land Registry, I sat down and I said, look, I said, you've stolen my property. I said, you've changed my title deeds and given it to somebody else. No signatures. I haven't signed anything. I said, if I buy a house, I sign a contract, it's witness. They sign a contract, it's witness. We exchange contracts, title deeds are changed. None of that's happened. She looked me straight in the face and said, we only need a county court stamp. I said, I can go to the stationery shop this afternoon and have a county court stamp made up. Are you going to help me steal people's property? She says, it doesn't work like that. And I said, you're a paper clearing warehouse for the banks and judiciary to steal property. And she looked at me and she went, I can neither confirm nor deny that. Sorry. And
So,
how I understand it, Brad, is Mr. Webster registered a property. Mr., Miss, Mrs. are business titles. Shopkeepers, businesses cannot own property. They can only own title. And that's what I owned. I owned a piece of paper that said I can live there. I didn't own a brick because Paul didn't register that. It wasn't in the private. As soon as Mr. Webster registered that property, it was put straight into commercial jurisdiction. Now council tax applies to that because council tax only applies to non-domestic commercial property. So it's all done at Land Registry. And we're taught to do that. We're taught to act as a debtor. My mum said, work hard, pay your bills, Brad. I'm pretty sure your mum probably said the same. But paying bills...
my mum would never pay any bills in her life.
well, my mum ran her own business. She's been here longer than me, Bradley, and she went, work hard, pay your bills. Make sure you always pay your bills, but don't pay them until you have to, till that red letter comes. She paid bills all her life.
Just so I get this right in my head, right? So basically, did your partner, did she own a property at the same time?
No, she didn't own anything. She just had her name on mine.
And so how did you argue the jurisdiction issue then? Because by the sounds of it, you got a court order against you.
No. Well, that was the point. I didn't understand that until everything was. They'd already sold the house. They'd already took the house,
Oh,
but
they took your house.
I didn't understand how and why.
Yeah.
I could
Right.
well no, I could understand why because there was equity, but I couldn't understand how. How are you taking my property? Because if I come and take your property, Brad, that's theft. So they
Yeah.
just took my property. Well, county courts have full jurisdiction over everything commerce, martial law, maritime law. They have full jurisdiction. So they just treated me as a shopkeeper who owned the shop. That was it.
Right.
And that's all they had to do. They kept their fingers crossed. If I brought something up, they'd have to. I mean, you yourself know case law, right? There's a case called Carlin Hughes versus Santander. Anthony Carlin over in Northern Ireland, serving Northern Ireland police officer. He attempts to arrest the judge in his mortgage hearing. This is 2014, something like that. And he attempted to make an arrest of that judge because as he said, as a constable, an investigating constable, I knew I had information that there was fraud being committed. The judge ran into his chambers. This is where the police were called on Anthony. Now, Anthony got arrested and got done for contempt of court, did 2 weeks in jail, serving Northern Ireland police officer. Comes out of jail after 2 weeks, took to the police station, sacked. So he lost his job, he lost everything. But case law from the High Court, the judge said, look, Santander, you're a very big building society, but I can't take your word that this man owes you money. You've got to prove it. Well, that's the stumbling block. They can't prove that they've lent Anthony money because they can't lend money. They're bankrupt. They can only facilitate a credit agreement between
That's
a
like
debtor
the
and a creditor.
that's like the Michael Beniccio argument, isn't it?
Well, it is and it isn't. It is and it isn't. It is an argument what Michael Burness
And
is.
he is one smart cookie. He is but he failed.
Well, like I said, it's open to interpretation because there's a lot of people took cases on, Brad, who, they say all the right things, but then there's nothing there. It's an argument. So people are trying to use that argument because it's a good argument, but it's not winning you anything. It's like standing in a county courtroom saying, I've no contract with this gas company. The gas company will go, yeah, we agreed, we've no contract with him. And the judge, well, how are you going to pay it? It's not. This is what I mean. People jump on these bandwagons without doing their own due diligence. That's why me and Alex, we've been involved in a lot over the years, but we've always kept
Are you Alex?
I am.
Alex.
Sorry, Alex. I didn't say hello. Sorry, I apologise.
No, it's all right, Paul. Good
We just hit the ground running, mate. We just hit the ground running.
Yeah,
But the argument for Anthony was for the bank. That's all the case law was. The bank proved that he owed money. So when they got the bank involved in my case, I put this case law before the judge in my bundle. The judge, Brad, picked my case law up, turned it upside down and put her hand on top of it and said, I can't see that. I take the bank's word that you owe them money.
What? They just say that?
Mm-hmm.
They said that?
Yeah, they just said, we take the bank's word that you owe them money. They didn't have to prove that I owed them money. So the case law didn't count because she didn't see it. If she'd have seen it, she'd have had to apply it. But she just turned it upside down.
They can't do that. They can't do that.
They did it, mate. They did it with...
What, in your case?
Yeah. Over the first 5 hearings, I had over 30 coppers present, armed police on the first one, video evidence gatherers, and it was all for the sale of a house. And they got the bank involved, and the bank said, you owe us £54,000 or whatever. I said, okay, I'll pay you what I owe. You show me a bill of exchange, a contract, and the accounting. Where have you got the money from to lend me? Well, they can't show me anything, so...
Paul?
Yeah?
I'm just thinking here, mate, that, we started off with this question of activism versus awareness raising. I mean, this is a clear example that both of you have been involved in a very proactive form of activism to attempt to secure justice through the channels that have been authorised for us to use. whether they should have been or they shouldn't. Those are the systems that we're engaging with. And that activism, unfortunately, has not been successful. And this is why we're talking about it now. So on the question of activism versus awareness raising, which don't have to be mutually exclusive, we've got to work out how we get critical mass. Because if a judge in his own court can flagrantly turn your papers upside down and say, I'm not looking at this, there's no accountability within that system, which is avowedly saying it's corrupt, which means you are small fry. In theory, you could have been done for contempt of court on some arbitrary grounds if you'd have said something about that. Which
Well,
is
I took it to judicial review, and the Right Honourable Judge Platt, sitting at Manchester, told me that my case had no merit. And the reason he threw it out for no merit was because I didn't name the county court as the defendant. I named the judge. Well, last thing I remember is I couldn't put a county court building onto a stand and cross-examine a brick. So, again, they just made things up that they could stop the judicial review.
technicalities.
Sorry.
Technicalities and loopholes. We know this is what they specialise in. And there won't be any traction when we're trying to fight using their tools. We might have to go into their courts. But the question is, how do we go into those courts? I mean, they view us with suspicion from the outset. Because, again, you're like the salmon swimming against the tide. So you're already marked. They want compliance. I mean, that's the whole point in a top-down model. Comply with the structure you've got in place. Behave. It's like we teach kids being 3-4 years old. When they behave for the whole week, they get a gold star. And the kid at the end of the week that's done best in shutting up and not asking any awkward questions might get rewarded with a chocolate bar. So the bottom line is our schooling system has been training us for a long time into compliance on subtle levels in developmental psychology. So I think we've got to dig deeper and start to ask, why are some of these barriers in place? Because if we can't actually change it through this form of skilled activism backed by knowledge that's got them banged to rights, we've got to be looking at awareness raising again. And so we're back to this tail chasing scenario potentially. That here we are raising awareness now. And, let's get some feedback in the chat. Come on, guys. What would you guys do?
I want to answer a couple of your questions, a couple of points you just made there. I've got some on Paul as well, but I forgot them already. In terms of Fabrice, he was very unwell for a long period of time. I've not spoken to him for a little while, but he become very unwell. Now, going back to what you're saying, success rate, I've got a very, very high success rate. It's like massive, and because I can't kind of like comply with the system, and I don't argue with frivolous arguments or try and challenge policy or jurisdiction. I've never challenged jurisdiction ever, because I want them to have jurisdiction, because I want them to hear my case. And I think a lot of people in what I remember back in the day, Paul, you probably know more about this than me, because I've not been involved. I remember back whenever it was, that a lot of people used to shove loads of paperwork into court. And the courts didn't read it, didn't entertain it, didn't understand it, all that sort of stuff. Okay. And I used to deal with a lot of cases where I was like a road sweeper, picking up all the pieces. And it got so laborious. I'm just trying to think of one guy. I'm just trying to think of his name. He went to prison for council tax.
Roger Hay.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. So basically, Roger Hay.
He was the reason armed police were called on me, because he set a precedent in 2011 when he tried to arrest the judge in the council tax hearing.
That's it, yeah. Him and the other guy with the glasses.
Yeah, Rob.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. Are they still about?
Yeah, I'm still in touch with Rob. Roger lives in New Zealand now, so we don't see much of Roger, but One of my best mates was involved in that hearing. He was the only one who didn't get arrested because he listened to what the judge had to say. The judge said, nothing's happening today. We're not ruling on anything. We're just shutting it. He said,
it was chaos. It was chaos. I watched the videos.
Yeah, they were, honestly, mate. But
you know what? The funny thing is, right? This is where I'm saying it's different. So Roger Hayes, what's his name? Danny somebody did a judicial review for him to get him out of prison. Right? He's from Plymouth. Some
Danny
guy.
Martin.
That's it. That's the one. Yeah, that's him. Yeah. Right. I got contacted by Peter and Tony. Right. True story. And they said to me, they got this lady called Carla Buckle. Right. She's a grandma.
Yeah.
And we want to get her out of prison before Christmas. So I was traveling to Wales. So I said, look, I'll do all the paperwork for you. And then Danny tried it and failed. I'll do all the paperwork for you. And they led me to believe at the time, obviously Tony's the only one that can validate this because Peter's dead. So I meet them at the High Court, hand over the paperwork. They both stare at me saying, what do we do now? And I was saying, just go to court 37, put your paperwork into the court and you'll get a hearing. And I believed, I understood at the time, they knew what they were doing. I just completed all the paperwork and a statement. And they said to me, can you do it? And I was thinking, I need to go to Wales. And they said, I'll guarantee we'll take you to Wales. So I said, okay, fine, fuck it, I'll do it. I've never done it before. But I knew my paperwork was good and I could argue the position articulately. So we went before a lady called Lady Justice Andrews. She was lovely, absolutely lovely. And I knew the clerk there. I didn't know her, never met her before. But the clerk and the staff there, because I always showed them respect and that sort of thing, they knew me. We were very friendly. They knew me by name. And so basically I submit the application, the judge come out, and then we recessed over lunch. And the clerk come up to me, and I just said to her, I said, how's it going? She said, oh, no, it seems all right. It's, we're okay. So I go into court, and the judge ordered her immediate release that day. Then Peter and Tony, I said, I need to go to Wales. And they said, can we go and pick her up? Because she was in Reading somewhere near there or something. So I said, oh, fine, fuck it. We'll go and pick her up. I don't even know this woman. Never met her, don't know anything about her other than what they told me. And she was released. The prison wouldn't release her. And I said, well, if you're not going to release her, we're just going to call the police. Because there's a committal order attached to this, a penal notice. You must release her. So they went and grabbed her and released her, and we went to the pub and then took her to Newbury where she lived at the time. I don't know where she lived anyway now. But yeah, this is where I'm saying, if you do things right, you can succeed. Someone like Danny Bamping has lost many, many, many cases, including trying to change a street name and shit like that. He's a weirdo.
I believe so. I remember him about the changing the names. But back in the day, Bradley, you, like I said, the case law that it was you were just using specifics. It wasn't, you weren't trying to make anything out of something. You just had it there. Case law, case law, case law. If we stick to this, it's got to apply, hasn't it?
Less is more. Just so, for example, my argument with British Gas, that second hearing, which Peter didn't attend, but he must attend. He needed to attend the third hearing. Yeah. In the second hearing, I argued that what British Gas are doing is chucking the kitchen sink at it. Yeah. Right. Where my folder was about that big, and their files were a stack. And what they were hoping for, they can rely on something. Just hoping some shit sticks.
Yeah.
Where my focus has always been on less is more. Keep your mouth shut. Yeah. Just gauge the room of what's going on and what's being said. Don't overtalk people. Be polite. And trust me, specifically at county court level, I've had arguments with judges, and I'm just a Mackenzie friend. One time they called security on me.
Me too, mate. Well, I had our police.
It's only happened once at Watford County Court, and I said to the people that I was assisting, I said, stand your ground, don't be scared. I said, I'm going to leave the room. The security didn't actually come, but the judge told me he called security. And basically told me shut up and all this sort of thing. Don't know what I'm talking about. And I said, listen to the people before I left. There's a couple. I said, just follow what the directions I put in that paperwork. Right? What happened? I sit in the lobby waiting for them. The judge gave them the order that I drafted. Yeah. And just imagine if I wasn't there.
Yeah, I can.
That is so not fair.
No, I don't need to imagine. I know what it's like with these places. And again, people morally have this thing that they know everything's wrong, Brad. They know things need sorting out. Nobody knows where to start. I didn't know where to start. I just was told that this is what we're going to do with your house. And I'm going, hang on a minute. Your own laws say you can't do this. And then I saw what they were doing. And they were just taking my property as if it was theirs to deal with. And I thought, how does this work? And it's because of how we're registering things when we register a car with a keeper and not the owner. All this stuff means something legally, and they're using English words that everybody thinks that's English, that. And it doesn't even mean the stuff that we're meaning. So I agree with you about the jurisdiction. Let the court have the jurisdiction. But when the jurisdiction isn't there for them to have, unless I've given it to them, well, my house was only in their jurisdiction because of how I registered it. If I'd have put it into a trust or if I'd registered it in private, we wouldn't have been in that courtroom. They wouldn't have been able to grab everything. They'd been able to grab nothing. Banks.
How long was you with her for?
11 and a half years.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. So technically you are considered.
Well, do you know what? I'll tell you what it come down to, something even simpler, Brad. It came down to that when we got together, I didn't have a bank account. So she had a bank account, so we opened a joint account. Well, all my wages got paid into the joint account. The mortgage and the bills were all paid out of my money. She only paid for the water out of her own money. Everything else came out of my money. But because her name was on that account, she paid half the mortgage.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter in English law, though. So, for example, even if you had a separate bank account, you were paying the entire mortgage, it doesn't matter. The way the judiciary see it is that basically she's entitled to half your assets.
It was because I put her on the mortgage, though.
It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. Well, seriously.
I would have argued, Bradley. I'd have argued on that.
I'm sure you'd argue for England.
Mate, to be fair, I've never gone into a courtroom for an argument. When I went into courtroom with British Gas, I had a check. I had a remedy. I didn't argue. I said, I'm sticking to the check. I'm not paying because I'm setting it off under the bills of exchange. And that was it. It was like setting a bomb off in there. They just didn't know what to do. We were going to court hearings for warrants, and they were ripping the warrants out in the corridor, not even going into the courtroom, Brad. They were just taking it out because they were that used to just turning up. Rubber stamp, just like...
I must admit, one thing that still confuses me to this day is how a local authority can do council tax demands and get orders from a magistrate's court in bulk.
They're doing it with gas warrants.
I can't understand how that's even legal.
It's not. They need, for a warrant to be executed, it has to have particulars. We need a warrant because, but none of that's getting put in. They're just writing. Yeah, it's gas warrants. They're doing 1954 Gas Act stamp. Well, what's part of it? Is there something wrong with it?
I definitely know the gas warrants are flawed, right? I definitely know that. But the council tax, where they've just got names and addresses and amounts, on massive spreadsheets, and they just all get stamped off in one go.
Yep. Yep.
There's no interrogation, no nothing.
No, the way I understand it,
I don't get that. I don't get that.
the way I understand it is that, say there's 50 liability orders going to be made up by a council so they hire a room in a court and they hire a judge for the day, and they've got a bundle of liability orders. Those are based on the property, and all that property, according to Section 3 of the Local Government Finance Act, every property in this land is deemed commercial, as there is no list, and there's no list required to show any property exempt from non-domestic rates. So non-domestic rates apply to all property. How? It's because of how we've registered it. It's what we got told in our High Court with council tax was the judge said, at this moment in time, your properties are capable of being commercial. Not listening to anymore. And he shut the case.
No, I don't believe that.
Mate, I was there. Jonathan Doyle versus Judge Fordham. It was my case. There was four of us.
He said your residential home, your dwelling.
And that you've just used the word. He found we'd used the word reside in a valuations office agency document that we'd done. You can reside in a bed and breakfast, so residential can also apply to a B&B, which is commercial. So he just shut the case down and said, at this moment in time, the properties are capable of being commercial, and I'm not listening to any more, and shut us down.
What, at a later date? Or
the High Court appeal shut the appeal down.
No, what I mean is the property could be deemed a commercial at a later date.
Yeah, it's capable of being commercial. So the argument that we were saying is, look, none of this property is commercial. He couldn't give it us, Bradley. He had to find a way, and he went back 3 years. This judge worked hard. He went back 3 years.
What was you arguing then? Sorry, I don't understand this.
That council tax only applies to commercial property, as per Section 3 of the Local Government Finance Act.
What, council tax only applies to commercial property?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yes,
really?
Section 3 of the Local Government Finance Act tells you that it only applies to non-domestic, and there's no list to show, and there's no list required to show any property exempt from non-domestic
Why
rates.
can't you just walk into court and just say that then? I've never heard that before.
Exactly. So from the valuations office to the county court to the High Court to the High Court appeal, and that judge and I'm telling you, if you'd have seen how the judges were acting with us, one fella came up from London to be in Wigan, and the judge was saying, she was looking at him going, "You're giving me nothing here," because our case was tight. Our case was tight with it. You're giving me nothing. She couldn't get anything. But because the case was shut down, they give us costs. So we had to get out. We had to deal with that somehow, because if we go to the courts again, brothers, it's
what? So they failed,
and again we have to hope they're a different judge. And that judge, if it is a different judge, we have to hope that judge will overturn another judge's decision. And we've never seen that happen.
So they failed, and you got awarded costs.
No, we got told to pay costs.
All right, but what you're saying is, though, this Section 3, is it? You said
Section 3, yeah.
Yeah, it says that basically council tax only applies to commercial properties.
Yeah, all property is deemed commercial. All property in this country is deemed commercial.
I can't see how that's possible.
Well,
It's based
on
hereditament, anything that's attached to a commercial business. So say you've got a shop and you've got an outbuilding and somebody lives in that outbuilding or a flat above, you can use that storage for your business. So your business rates are for your business, but now council tax applies to any storage on that commercial property. And because our byways and streets are deemed as commercial, my house is sat on a commercial road. It can be a shop, I could turn this into a shop easy. But you can't tax anything that doesn't have revenue coming through it. And they wouldn't.
But how does that affect things like planning then?
Well, for me, it's exactly the same, because if you own every brick, that's your castle. If I registered my property in the private and I own it, that means I own every brick, the dimensions of the property, 6 to 12 foot down. That's my castle. I can fight to the death for that. But if Mr. Webster's registered that property, it's a shop. I can't fight to death for my shop. I can't set off gas, water, and electric, because I potentially am using gas and electric to make profit, to invite people into my shop. So I have to pay for it out of my profits. That's what a debtor does. But as a creditor, that doesn't apply to me. It's the life what we've been taught since we grew up, Brady. I couldn't tell you how bad it felt that my mum and dad, who worked like dogs, my mum 13 hours a day in her own shop, my dad long distance lorry driver, back in the day where you did 6 nights on, 1 night off, 6 nights on, not 6 on, 6 off like you do now. So these people work like dogs, and they said, you've got to work hard, pay your bills. And as a 7-year-old, I said, Mum, I'd rather play on my bike. I don't want to get a job. And she said, you'll have to get a job. And she said, you'll want to buy a house, you'll want to get married, you'll want to have kids, you'll want to have a car, you want to go on holiday. And I said, why? She said, because that's life. Well, it's not right. We've been taught, you go to Eton, you're taught the bills of exchange by the age of 13. You go to my school, you're not taught that. I touched on it on one history lesson when I was 10. And I remember writing the Bills of Exchange Act title, underlining it, putting my pen down, Bradley, leaning back in my chair and going, waste of my time this, I'll never use it. I can't even go into a shop and get a Mars bar without participating in Bills of Exchange. And I just couldn't understand why people weren't interested, that they'd been duped. But it was easier to dupe these people than tell them that they'd been duped. And all I could see was using my common sense. And I lost family and friends from telling them that they shouldn't be paying the bills.
Yeah. Because you've probably gone quite far down the rabbit hole, Paul. Do you remember that Peter of England guy? Because I was talking about him the other day, you know.
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Do you remember him?
Yeah, I do.
Where he was a scammer. Would you agree or not?
I don't. I'll tell you, I don't know enough about him for what he had done, but I do know people who've done the wee rechecks. One lad paid for a £13,000 Audi, got it, but then they did it bounced, and then they came after him for it. Never heard anything ever again. But he did tell us how it had worked, but then he never told everybody how they come and took it off him and stuff like that. We've had loads of people like this, Bradley, over the years, haven't we? Me and Alex were talking about it earlier. These people who say, "Oh, this is all you've got to do. Right? Do this, do that." And it's so easy. I've not paid my council tax for 15 years, and it's just you just ignore them. You do this, and then you find out they live with the mum, and the mum pays for everything, or the wife pays for everything, and stuff like that. And they're feeding like guinea pigs to challenge them into doing stuff.
Another two people I remember is Guy Taylor and Tom Crawford.
Well, we lost Guy. Poor Guy's not with us anymore. I've not heard from Tom for a while. But yeah, I remember all that because it was all fresh. All the mortgage stuff, all the bills stuff, it was all fresh. It was all just coming out. And, you find yourself at the front line with armed police being called on you, and you're only asking questions. I mean, all those police, right, Bradley, I've never, out of 3 letters to the court manager, nothing. I had to go through the police crimes commissioner to get an interview with a constable who couldn't tell me why these police had been called, but took all the details of what happened in the court and then said, that's criminal, that. They can't act like that in court. And then to a detective sergeant, comes back 10 minutes later, guess what? It's a civil matter.
Is that because you're part of a large group of people?
No, weren't a part of a large group. There was me and 2 others. I had 2 others supporting me. Yeah. I never went in heavy-handed. When I asked where the judge got his authority from, that's what Roger Hayes had asked. So as soon as I asked that question, police were called straight away. That's when armed police turned up. and I couldn't get any reasons to why that happened. Serving prison officer, armed police called on him. It's not even in the paper, mate. So
yeah, that's very unusual. Very unusual.
well, I saw.
I remember one court case, a family court case, that I was dealing with, an Australian guy, where armed police were sitting next to us, and I didn't understand why they're there. And I said to them, I said, how come you're there? Who are you here for? He said, for your man. And I said, why? He said, because he's an arms dealer. He sells guns and stuff like that. As a family court case, and the wife was scared of him and that sort of stuff. So they sat through the entire hearing and that sort of thing, but they said nothing. They were just bored.
Same with my coppers. The sergeant, with his hands in his flak jacket, leans over to my mate and says, any idea why we're here, mate?
Yeah, they didn't really know why they were there.
None of them had any idea. I had 6 coppers turn up a warrant, a forced entry warrant, that everybody left apart from one copper who was asking questions. And we got into mortgages, we got into bills, and I said, it's coming for you like this. I said, you'll be attending some of your family's houses with bailiffs, and they'll be asking you to arrest your family members while they break in and change meters. We've had people arrested, put in cuffs, Bradders, put into the back of a police car. The locksmiths gained entry. They've changed the meters. They took the lad out of the car, de-arrested him. That's it. Change the meters. Yeah. No, you can't do that. But they did it.
I've seen stuff like that on YouTube, actually. I've seen it. Yeah. Paul, can you just give me a couple of minutes? I just need to pop to the restrooms. I'll let you talk to Alex a sec. I'll be straight back. Yeah.
Of course you can, mate. Yeah. Interesting, eh?
Yeah, well, I was going to bring it to, I don't know, just bring it down to brass tacks for people, hopefully. Basically, you, at that point, when you mentioned that council tax was in commercial jurisdiction, you raised Brad's awareness because he wasn't aware of it before. So coming back to our starting point again, between awareness and activism.
Yeah.
The activism got thwarted. You, with another activist who's been in court quite a lot, have been able to share knowledge that Brad didn't have prior, and his awareness level's gone up. So that's a good illustration of how this type of dialogue can raise awareness. But there's another complicating factor, because we've got to bring it back to what the hell we can do about this. So, and the issue is, it's very simple on a lot of levels. So again, we should just not overcomplicate it. The system rewards conformity and punishes non-conformity. So basically, that's the bottom line that we all have to be aware of. If you conform, you'll be rewarded. And if you're a non-conformist, you'll be punished. And what these systems do is they always bribe people with a piece of the kingdom. You know, kings used to do it sometimes in marriage contracts. Oh, yeah, you can have my daughter and your son and so on. You can have a part of my kingdom if you join forces with me. This is how politicians become corrupted. And, you know, when we had the MP's expenses scandal, the only surprise was that people were surprised. Because at the end of the day, these corporates all line their own nest. They're in it together and they're protecting number one. I remember my mum used to say about her own mother when she was growing up in 1940s Belgium. She used to talk about country then. And she was a Belgian and they'd been invaded by Germany. So you'd think that they'd be into nationalism. And so it was said to my grandmother, you know, about her country. And she smashed her hand on her purse and said, you know, basically, my purse is my country. So a lot of people are led by that sort of thing. And therefore, they're buyable. They're corruptible. You see that in politics. You see it in the court system. People don't bite the hand that feeds them. So the problem that we've got is, although you've raised Brad's awareness in this particular area, and the benefit of our dialogue is that we're always potentially raising awareness, we know that the activism's got limits, because the activists who act against a government agenda will be punished. And the conformists, like the judges who are high up in the system, will not show sympathy to non-conformists. They'll be rewarded, aka paid, for shutting down the non-conformists. So until, I mean, the bottom line of that is everybody on here is probably already a nonconformist, obviously, but we need to double down on becoming nonconformist. But what does that mean? Well, nonconformist doesn't mean I don't agree with the status quo, because who would? You wouldn't agree with the status quo. It's doing something about the status quo. And what can you do that's outside of your own control? Nothing. So you can only do what you can do to not conform, to not comply. We did it massively under the regs from 19 sounds like it, feels like it, 2020 to 2022, when we're in lockdown. Do not comply. Don't wear a mask. Don't comply. Don't take the shots. And those of us who were wise enough not to do that are the healthier for it. And you can still be shut down for saying the wrong words in social media. So the key is, bottom line, if you go into the lion's den, even if you're equipped with knowledge, so even if Brad now knows about the council tax being commercial and he decided to go in and challenge his own council tax bill, because that's what we're talking about, he's now got this new awareness from being on here tonight. And he says, well, I never knew that before. Eureka moment, boom. And he says, right, I'm going home. I'm going to contact my local council tomorrow and I'm going to begin proceedings of resisting this because I'm no more aware. And that could lead him on a path into a courtroom. Now, we don't know what the outcome would be, but he could become really courageous about this if he chose to. And he would be a non-conformist going into the lion's den that's full of conformists who get rewarded. And the goal from that system would be to punish him. So what does he do? What do we do? I think we have to come back squarely to the fact that we've got to buy the badge or the T-shirt. I am a non-conformist. I like this. I'm a cognitive dissident. Yeah, I'm a dissident, but I'm a cognitive one. I don't fit in to this mental framework. I don't accept or celebrate this system, but I'm not going to cross some of their lines. I'm just going to draw my own. And there's a big difference. I think you were saying before, Brad, you'll go into a court and you'll respect that court system. You can still say to the judge, you can still conduct yourself respectfully, but you won't tread on the toes unnecessarily.
Well, the thing is, the thing that I found in the court system, specifically at county court level, where it's quite amateurish, in my opinion, anyway, it's easy to piss off a judge. And so that's what I always say to people: just keep your mouth shut. Just let the paperwork do the talking, and just say, "Judge, have you read the paperwork?" Because lion's share of the time they say, "Yeah," and you know they haven't. They don't have enough reading time. They're too busy, and in all honesty, they're quite arrogant. Now, that being said, my experience across the board of the judiciary is actually very good, as best as it can be. But I recognise that they are so stressed. We are coming so Americanized, where we're becoming so litigious and that sort of stuff. I mean, I wrote down about you mentioned about Section 3. I'm intrigued by that. I can't imagine that being the legislation they rely on, but I'm guessing you guys have done loads of research, so you could be right. But I've never heard of that before. But I mean, when I look at the face of law and legislation, I find it's far easier to focus on key issues within the legislation and keep it as small as possible, and you have far more success. That's where I've had success anyway. I've done things I could never imagine. I've got passports revoked from other parents and all this sort of stuff, which I've never done before in my life. And somehow I managed to do it just by doing a bit of research, keeping it very simple, arguing the case, and I get what I want. What I think a lot of people do is they call it paper terrorism in the court system now. You basically bit like what British Gas did to Peter Glastonbury. It's nothing beyond that. I mean, it was I couldn't believe all the shit they produced. It is unbelievable. I mean, maybe Tony's got a copy of their files because I posted them back to Peter. It was unbelievable how much they submitted to the court. And I actually said to the court, this is just like paper terrorism, because I was using their own words against them, because that's what I hear what the courts say. With people that argue, like you say, without merit, totally without merit, or frivolous arguments and that sort of stuff. I mean, I remember. Do you remember Ebert?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
So basically, a civil restraint, as it's now called, used to be called the Ebert order, right? Was built on the back of him, right? He went to the court something like 100 times arguing his repossession, something ridiculous like that, and he went all the way up to the. I don't know if it went to the Supreme Court. I'm not too sure, but it went really high up to the courts, and so they had a think about how do we deal with people like this, because they'd never experienced it before.
No.
So he's a Jewish guy. Not that makes any relevance, but believed that he knew the law more than anybody, quoting all these legislations and all that sort of stuff. Right? So I did not know about him at the time, right? So he contacted me saying, I've got this case, blah, blah, blah. I can't remember what it was, to be honest. And it was quite a simple case, actually, in fairness. And I said, look, I'll do the paperwork for you, blah, blah, blah. And then a judge, so I basically submit the paperwork by my email address. And the clerk contacted me saying, do you understand this guy's got an Ebert order? And I'm thinking, Ebert order? What's that? I've never even heard of it before. So I'm thinking, Ebert, what does that mean? So I'm thinking it's the person, he's got an order against him of some sort. And I said, no. And then they basically explained that he cannot access the court without permission of one of 3 judges. And because his name started getting banted around, and he was preying on people like Crawford and Guy Taylor and all this sort of thing, talking about his legal scholarship and all this sort of thing. Eventually, what happened was they changed it from an Ebert order to what's called now a civil restraint. So effectively, if you bring meritless claims, more than 3, to the court, you get what's called a civil restraint against you. So it prevents you from just accessing the courts, clogging up the system, that sort of stuff. But yeah, that was part of that claim. The Ebert order, but that Ebert was a nut job.
Yeah, that's a real blast from the past. I forgot all
that. Yeah, I remember him. Yeah, I remember him.
Yeah, well, there was so much going on back then, Bradley. It was like 2016, 2017, going into 2017. That's when the court said to the gas agents and that, said, look, apply for your warrants. We'll just give them you. They'll have to come to court and we'll deal with them. And they did. They just shut everybody down. You can't get remedy in those courts. I've been there with remedy. And like I said, anybody who knows me, who's been in court with me, they know I'm not bombastic. They know I'm not a knobhead in there. They know I'm articulate. They know I don't swear. They know I don't shout. But I've seen judges shuffle paperwork and say, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. And I've just asked them for a remedy. But they can't give it me. They can't give it me because the Privy Council live off all the money that is being raked through these courts. Thursdays are still known as Money Day at Magistrates Court. For me, brothers, it was a case of I'd learned something really fundamental. I understood that as a creditor, I shouldn't be paying these bills because I'm paying taxes. I know that my nan and my mum would have paid all their taxes, so they shouldn't have been paying these bills. They should have been setting them off. Businesses pay, so we balance both sets of books. If we pay and don't set it off, the Treasury can't balance the taxpayers' books. So the national debt just keeps going up and up and up and up. It's got to. And it's because of us.
Well, I don't necessarily agree with that proposition, but there's no way we can pay the national debt back ever.
That's why the debt has to be forgiven. It has to be forgiven, but we should have been setting off. If we'd have set off, we'd have flattened the national debt. If we'd have been balancing the books, we wouldn't have a national debt. That would mean there would be more revenue for people, which would be bigger infrastructure, more businesses, more revenue, more jobs, more revenue. I didn't see a downside to it unless you want to steal the wealth of a nation and collapse the economy. And that's basically where we're at now. You know, the Americans, since the petrodollar contract didn't get renewed, they're printing money like mad. They're going to collapse. And if that dollar goes, mate, we go into bricks. All of a sudden, central bank digital currency with the digital ID is right on the cusp. To get the digital ID in, we're going to be in a lot of trouble, Brad.
Yeah, I think there's massive evidence to suggest that after the American elections, there's going to be a recession coming within the first quarter. Yeah. Because the dollar, even though the Americans talk up their economy like they're the best in the world, how can you say that, right, when your debt is just going up and up and up? You know what they say about bankruptcy? If you cannot pay your creditors as and when they fall due, you're bankrupt, right? America's been bankrupt. In the UK, it's the same. But yet, you know, we're AAA rated.
I think it's because it's not about what wealth we've got, it's about the liquidity. So if they take the working population, that's what they're backed by. That's it. It's only backed by the. We don't even make anything. We're a consumer society. We don't manufacture. You know, like when Hitler took over Germany in 1933, they were in abject poverty. All of a sudden, within 6 years, everybody's at work and they're one of the second biggest superpowers. How did they do that? They stopped the central bank and they printed their own money. They had their own engineers. Everybody wanted their science and engineers. Well, you pay for it in gold. Well, that's how they became. Hitler flattened the books. It's never been done since. Never been done before. The only time America balanced the books was when Lincoln said, we'll sort ourselves out. We won't borrow money. And they
Lincoln.
Yeah. That's the only time the Americans balanced the books during the Civil War.
All right.
That's the only time they balanced the books. And then I forget whether it was Andrew. No, can't remember which president it was that said, "There you go. I've given you a banking system for as long as you can hold on to it." And that was when the Rothschilds said that, no, we want the central banking system back in. And it took them up to the Federal Reserve Act, that. So they had a balanced nation. They had money coming in and everything was there. They could have had that American dream. And then it was after the war.
That question, right, because this really intrigues me. Can you think of another system? By the sounds of it, you guys talk about this sort of stuff quite a lot. To fiat currency, where basically the banks are allowed to create money as and when they see fit.
If the Treasury printed our own money, we wouldn't have that problem. We wouldn't have to rely on the banks. If the Treasury was doing our own currency and we weren't relying on banks and being charged for it, it's because I don't know how they work it, whether they say they buy bonds that are backed by us or what, but they're buying it with pieces of paper that they're printing. So where is it? There's nothing.
How would you create wealth though? Though that's the bit I don't get.
Well, the wealth. Look at what they do with the paper money. They take paper money and buy physical wealth.
Yeah, but let's just say they start with number one now. Yeah, £1. How does that £1 then get distributed to, I don't know, 100 people?
How do you apply the worth to it? You can, if you're living in a debt-based economy like what we have. I always said, brothers, the system that I woke up in, it isn't. Considering it's a debt-based economy, if we acted correctly it would work for us in our benefits. If we acted as creditors and not as debtors, we would be setting these bills off. The Treasury would be managing the accounts better. The Treasury should be printing our currency, putting enough money, paper money into it without affecting the actual wealth. We did have gold until Gordon Brown sold it all. One of my local councillors seemed to think, I forget how much tons of gold he says that's in the Bank of England. Bank of England is, as you well know, it's not public, it's private bank, it's not our gold. All our gold's gone, it's been sold. So we only have, the only worth and wealth that we have is the credit of the labour. And since COVID, all we've got is all the middle class have gone, but basically they've been attacked. All the many businesses have gone, many jobs have gone. We don't make anything. We have pound shops, we have charity shops, we have nothing else. We can see everything's closing in, but it's when it gets to that point and people, people can still go to the chippy, people can still go to the pub. When they can't do that and they can't put the gas on, that is going to put people into a position where they've got to act. And most people aren't going to act very well.
No, I get that bit. I get that bit. Yeah, because I think, to be honest,
we've got a bit of a request for StreamYard here, Paul, in the chat. So just keep your eye on StreamYard. I think someone else wants to come on. Is it? Who is that? Don't know. But yeah, somebody wants to come on.
So I get the point where people literally need to fight for their lives. They're going to do whatever. Any natural human being will do that.
Yeah.
If you have to, for your family, that sort of stuff, you will do whatever. Because otherwise you do or die. So.
Yeah. Are you still all right? Because you said you're on a live at 10.
Yeah. What I was thinking about doing is just asking just one more question, if possible.
Go on,
because I've not joined one of your lives before. I did watch one of your lives, which you sent me, with you and Alex, who I now know as Alex, briefly. What are you currently focused on? What's your current agenda and that sort of thing? What's on your forefront? That's a question for both of you.
Alex?
Well, I don't think there's an hour, apart from a very loose one. The thing is, you could argue that there's a community issue going on for all those people who value the truth, or a bunch of individuals all non-conforming. And the difference between a bunch of individuals all, say, pulling in their own direction and people coming together is massive. So we were saying before about Paul's going to be delivering a talk a week tomorrow in Hapton, and we're talking about alternative media like the Light Truth paper. We've got to find alternative ways to get awareness into the channels and to sponsor activism. But it's a big question about action strategies, because there's a big part to play for faith community, because a lot of people are demoralized. There's been a demoralization strategy going on in the culture war for a long time. So there's the sense of collective action that we can take, raise awareness, act. Individuals can act, we can encourage each other. But the question is there any spiritual dimension to this? Because, from a Christian point of view, we hear a lot of the time that we don't fight against flesh and blood. We fight against principalities and powers of wickedness in high places. So no matter what you think about human evil, there's all that sort of cohort of people who believe there's something deeper going on. So there's so many different entry points into this. So my perspective is kind of a cocktail of all of them. I think we've got to have a new spiritually integrated humanity, which is focused on knowledge acquisition, awareness, taking responsibility, communicating clearly with one another, developing higher standards, holding each other to higher standards of ethics and values, because we've got to raise the quality of our consciousness. For too long, we've been pacified with weekend sports. Do you remember when it used to be all the stuff with Dickie Davis and World of Sports in the 70s and 80s and Grandstand, and it's taken off from there. Sky have got contracts and everything, wall-to-wall entertainment with sport, all the way through the weekends, Premier League fixtures, Championship fixtures, League One fixtures. So we are being anaesthetised, and there's always something to do that keeps people passive. So for me, as long as we can shake people out of non-conformity into non-conformity from conformity, that's the core business, however we do it.
For me, I wouldn't
Can,
say.
can I, Paul? Sorry, can I just ask a question? One question on that. Does that basically mean anarchy or protesting, or what does that mean?
Not protesting. But personally, this is what we started with, the question about the distinction between activism proper, which can take many forms. We've seen it in the Arab countries for a long time. There's certain types of extreme activism. Or do we raise awareness? And this is a fundamental question. Now, personally, I'm going to name the colours to the mast now. I think we all have to become activists, but not in the classic stereotype sense, which makes us all easy to pick off by the state, because that's what they're looking to do. So I think we need to raise our personal awareness about state of the world. We need to improve our level of personal equipping. So we need to have knowledge. So whether it's entry into a court system or whatever it is, but we live in a specialized culture. So we've tended to rely on specialists, trust the science, trust some specialist who it doesn't happen to be yourself. We've been lazy for so long in this, and it's kind of caught up with us now. So we've all got to become our own personal experts, standing our own personal authority. We'd call it sovereignty, for example. So we've got to encourage people to walk their own path of sovereignty and to become empowered. Because if we've got people, and I've used this before, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, but humans are so-called in the class of primates, and we're higher order primates compared to chimpanzees, gibbons, gorillas, and the like. But we're capable of operating like chimpanzees, gorillas, and the like. And we'd still be primates. So I think it's time for us, like we started at the beginning with Paul saying, it's time to grow up. Well, what does that involve? Taking responsibility, having a much broader view on life, and stepping up, taking responsibility. So it's not easy.
I agree with you. It's not easy.
Down to us. Raise our own awareness, raise our own level, and act.
Yeah. I agree with you. It's not easy. 100%, Alex. Paul, sorry about that.
Yeah.
No, I'm just saying I've not got an agenda anymore, Brad. I mean, 10 years ago, I wanted to grab everybody by their ears and headbutt them with every word of the Bills of Exchange, because I was called a nutter, I was called names, I was called all kinds, mate. And then all of a sudden, I did a second gas video in September 21, and then all the prices went up in April, and I got leathered. My video stream got leathered. I got questions. Everybody wanted this quick fix now. What button do I press, Webby, to make it all go away, type thing. So for me now, I mean, me and Alex have. There's been a few people that have constantly gone on at me to try and start this podcast back up. I did a few years of my own podcast. I did quite a few years on Raconteurs News as well. And it was all the same stuff we were talking about. 10 years ago we were talking about this stuff. It's only now that it's knocking on people's doors, and people can't pay. They can't just keep paying anymore because they've got nothing to do that with. It's all being stripped away. So these people are now being put into situations where they're going to react to their abilities. Well, that's what they want. So they built it up and built it up and built it up, and people are now going into courts or attempting to go into courts, but they're using stuff that I've seen 10 years ago that doesn't work. Standing in a commercial court saying, I'm a man. What are you doing?
Paul?
Wow, that's nuts.
On this score, we've got to overcome the mass hypnosis. Do you remember the movie? Obviously, everyone does, Life of Brian. Do you remember that time when they're all gathered outside Brian's window? And he said, you've got to think for yourselves. And they'll say, we've got to think for ourselves. So they're copying him, and it's like they're already being entranced. So at the very moment they say, we've got to think for ourselves, they're not thinking for themselves. They're parroting, and this is the power of the hypnotic. And, you're all individuals. We're all individuals, right? So at the end of the day, you can corrupt anything just by entrancing people.
Sorry, let me just quickly text these other people that they're going to be half an hour late. Hold on. Bear with me.
No worries. I'm gonna bring Taylor up.
Brilliant, fantastic. The more the merrier. And thanks for everyone contributing on the chat as well. It's much appreciated. If your voice hasn't been heard on the live, it's very important that you contribute in the chat. So we'll try and
I can't see any of your chat, by the way.
On the YouTube. Are you on the YouTube or just in the StreamYard, Brad?
I haven't a clue, to be honest.
Well, there you go.
I haven't got a clue either, because I can see the comments from YouTube in this chat, and I don't understand why you can't.
Because you're the host. Only the host can.
Alex has got YouTube open. That's how he's reading them, Brad.
Yeah,
Taylor, how you doing?
Doing all right, Webby. Been a while, man. You doing all right?
I'm doing okay, mate. Don't mention the Holocaust.
I'm not. I won't get you. I'm not trying to get you kicked off YouTube.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you, by the way, Taylor.
Nice to meet you too, man.
Taylor, this is Bradley. This is Taylor. He used to come on Raconteurs News a long time ago. He's Washington. Where? It's not Washington DC. It's Washington
State.
Washington State. That's it.
Yeah, near the Seattle.
Can you get kicked off on YouTube then?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Yes, you can.
I've already had. Mate, I've had. It was only 2 weeks back. I had one removed. 52 seconds in for misinformation. We were talking about COVID. We were talking about COVID, and it was medical misinformation. The algorithm just picked it up and just deleted the entire video. Fortunately, I've got it saved, but yeah, they're looking for everything on the algorithms now, Brad.
It's annoying, isn't it?
Oh yeah, you can't speak. Everything's right.
How does mainstream media get away with it talking about COVID and you're not allowed to?
Because they told the party line, don't they? They told us to wear masks. They told us that we needed these injections. They told us that everybody's going to die if we don't. They made us watch our nan die through a plate glass patio door and stuff like that. I couldn't get my head around that. If my mum had still been here, and she was, there's no way I would not be hugging my mum. No bloody way. I couldn't understand the hysteria. But when I thought it was just basic common sense, but people who I thought had common sense completely lost it.
Just one thing you mentioned, right? I understood recently, right? British Gas are no longer getting warrants for people's properties now. The courts have stopped it. Is that true?
Not sure about British Gas. I do know that was a court case over mental health issues being harassed and stuff like that. But I'm pretty sure they're still getting them, mate. I know Utility Warehouse and Eon and Scottish Power are still getting warrants. So I think British Gas just did it to the wrong people. The thing is, though, they don't care about the mental health thing. You've got some of these companies are signed up as what were they called, Alex? Not mental health advocates, but they have a policy for mental health, don't they? Well, when you have a policy for mental health, you also exclude people on it, and it's we're going to look after everybody who's it, but we're not going to do anything.
The ironic thing is the law hasn't changed, and I don't understand why that it hasn't been changed, because British Gas use warrants, which are basically effectively illegal, and I've never had the opportunity of another client like Peter. He wasn't a client; he wasn't paying me.
Yeah, I was doing
for free. Where someone was willing to take it to court. I've never met another person, because I would have loved to win that case, because we were spot on.
Mate, I said to Pete, all you've got to do, Pete, is take that gyro. When you say, why should this stay in place? You turn up and you say, well, I've been trying to settle it through the Bills of Exchange Act using the instrument that they've issued to me. And I thought, we're going to do this, we're going to do it. And then after that case, that was when the courts shut everything down, that, mate.
My argument was totally different from that. I know Peter mentioned it to me. But my argument is totally different. We would have nailed it, but unfortunately, he become unwell.
What was you were arguing though? Was it
Well,
about the warrant?
the sections of the statutes they were relying on was about health and
Oh,
safety, that sort of stuff.
yeah, for the warrant. Health and safety.
In regard to the warrant, in terms of the billing, that was again a separate argument down the line. But it's a bit like water. It's another great one.
Yeah.
So
I would have said the argument for the health and safety issue. I mean, with mine, when I was in court, I said, look, if this is about the warrant for health and safety, forced entry warrant, you could turn to whatever page it was in my bundle. I've invited British Gas to come and check everything and replace like for like, but you're not putting a pay-as-you-go meter in. Now, for that, if there's no health and safety issue, they can't force entry because then they've got to say, well, you owe money. Well, that was it. Pete's injunction paved the way for both remedies to come together.
It did.
Remedies to come together.
It's such a shame. Do you know what? An interesting one that I would love to see somebody do with regards to gas and electric. So, for example, they say the meters are our property. Yeah, fine. Everybody can accept that. Yeah. So you get an approved engineer, if you can find one, to disconnect them, set them aside, and put your own meters in. How they could argue that you're basically stealing gas and electric?
Well, the way I'd look at it is legally, if you can get a qualified engineer to fit a meter for you and give you a safety certificate, they've not got a leg to stand on.
Well, that's what I think as well.
But the only problem that I see from that is they can't then generate a bill. And if they can't,
that's what I understand the problem to be, is they don't know how to bill you, which is not your problem.
Well, it is our problem because if they can't say they all work correctly, so the gas company, I've put my meter in and I don't register it. The gas company cannot issue me a bill that I can set off. That HMRC can then lower national debt by balancing the books. They also, if I'm running a shop, can't invoice me for electric and gas use. So if I don't register the meter with a billing agent, I'm committing fraud against the taxpayer. When that meter's already registered, I don't care who owns it. That meter's registered. You give me a bill. When they refuse to accept the remedy, they're committing fraud against the taxpayer.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far or that deep, really. I've literally got to go very, very shortly. But my point being is, if you're using your own equipment, I would find it really interesting to understand. So, for example, there's many different gas companies that get supplies from the same pipeline. How they understand who owns what in that pipeline?
It's nothing to do with it, Brad. They are just revenue collectors for commercial and the agents for private. So it doesn't matter. It's the same supply. They're just different brokers. So British Gas, Scottish Power, E.ON. For the private citizen, for the home that isn't commercial, they should generate a bill. Attached to that bill is a joint gyro credit.
Let's just say, for example, then I change from British Gas to East Anglia or whatever. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How do East Anglia cut off British Gas and say we're supplying that house?
They just sort it between them.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's so dodgy.
It is, but it's because there's so much money in it. It's like if you've got British Gas up here and then you've got Octopus down here. Octopus are saying we'll give you better rates than British Gas. What they're saying is we'll steal less equity off you than what British Gas will. That's all they're doing. It's the same gas supply, but they're treating us as customers. If I'm a customer, I'm a debtor. And if I'm a debtor, I must pay. The bills of exchange has been pulled off the table. Yet all these bastards who live down in, Parliament, Westminster, all who entered Eton, they're all taught the Bills of Exchange Act. They all know how to operate in commerce. Go ahead.
Hey, listen, guys, I've got to go because I'm like 10 minutes late.
All right, Brad.
Very nice to talk to you guys. Sorry,
Yeah.
Taylor, we didn't have much chance to talk. Alex, I apologise as well, but hopefully I'll meet you guys again soon.
Yeah.
Nice one. Thanks for coming on, Brad.
Fantastic.
Okay, take care.
Okay, God bless.